Okay, hello everybody. I don't know how many people are actually online, but I gather we've got something like 40 odd people joining us. First thing I'd like to do, obviously, is welcome you. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of meetings over the next months and years to explain the business plan. What will happen is Emma, Zep, and Graham and I will take you through the business plan, and we'll explain the direction of travel that we're going to go in for the next 5 years. Could be subject to change, of course, but that's the plan. There'll be time for questions at the end. If you want to ask any questions, if you can click on the QA icon at the bottom of the screen and send your questions as we go along, and then we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the session. The business plan's been developed by Emma and her team for probably going on 18 months. We had got near to agreeing the original plan when COVID struck, so it's had to be totally revamped to a large extent to meet the requirements of the changes imposed by the pandemic. And it was approved by SMT, that's the senior management team, and by the board earlier in the autumn. Next year is our 60th anniversary in 2021, so that's a massive milestone for us. And we're going to take the opportunity to celebrate our successes, but we also need to reflect on the challenges the future brings. Yeah, it is a different world now to the one it was in 1960, whatever, when we were originally set up, and we have to be aware of that. It's vital that our plans are ambitious. Our audiences, expect that. Our audiences have changed massively from the ones when we first held open days at Didcot and over the subsequent years. So we've got to embrace the spirit of innovation that the GWR was. And if I'm being honest, the railway is at the moment around us. Everything's changing, the world's changing, and we need to change with it. But we need to obviously embody the spirit of the old Great Western Railway as it was. As I said, Emma has been instrumental in pulling the plan together and establishing it within SMT. You'll no doubt have heard as well that unfortunately she's stepping down in the middle of February from her role as our chief executive. We will be recruiting a replacement, but I'm glad to say that the board asked Emma if she'd like to join us as a director, and she's accepted that. So once she steps down as a paid employee, she will continue as a volunteer, and we can still make use of her vast experience, etc. That's my part. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Emma and her team, and then you don't have to listen to me again until the finance section. So over to Emma.
Thanks, Rich. I'm really pleased I can continue to contribute to the development of the Railway Centre, and I'm delighted that I've been invited to join the GWS board when I step down from the role of Chief Executive in February next year, as Rich has already mentioned. So the 60th anniversary and beyond is a really exciting time, of course, and development of the business plan has been a really productive process and a very useful process to go through. It's involved consultation with members and volunteers and has been shaped by both the senior management team and the board of directors. The board has a key strategic role in overseeing the plans, encouraging progress and helping to raise funds. The senior management team will be looking after the day-to-day activities and managing the delivery of the plan. And as you'll hear, the business plan includes significant opportunities, which volunteers and staff will be key to ensuring we make a success of. Okay, so I probably don't need to remind any of you of the Society's history, our reach and our impact. Of course, we're guardians of the most comprehensive collection of items from any single transport company in the world, which makes our collection really important, really unique and kind of a standout collection that we need to be incredibly proud of and do our best to share as widely as we can. The challenges for the next 5 years and beyond include engaging wider audiences, encouraging new volunteers, ensuring the centre's operations are financially sustainable, raising funds for development, and of course, conserving our unique listed buildings that really are at the heart of the centre. So there's plenty to do, but at the same time, it's important to remember just how much we've achieved as a society. Of course, groundbreaking restoration projects such as the King, the Steam Rail Motor and the Saint, which quite rightly have picked up several awards. You can see on the slide there. Becoming an accredited museum, receiving the Queen's Award, and increasingly being recognised as a great venue, a great heritage venue to visit. We've established a really firm foundation from which to achieve our ambitions going forward. Okay, so vision, mission and values. We've updated these to make them relevant to the 21st century and to really embody the ambitions that the Society has. Our vision is for Didcot Railway Centre to be recognised for the international importance of its collection and the value of bringing to life the golden age of steam as a dynamic living museum. And our mission is to fulfil our potential as a heritage venue at the centre of its community, accessible to all, striving to engage and inspire the widest possible audiences in the history and heritage of the Great Western Railway, the pioneering transport infrastructure that laid the foundations for contemporary transport innovation. Our vision and mission are important shared goals, our desired future position and our objectives as a business. Our values of authentic, welcoming, engaging, innovative, great quality and sustainable help to guide our day-to-day work and our future plans, and they ensure that we remain on track and true to the Society while stretching ourselves and driving improvement. A key part of developing the business plan was to take a hard look at ourselves and where we were at the start of this process. And Graham will take you through the early steps.
Thanks, Emma. Yes, so work on the
Graham, we can't hear you, Graham. You're on mute.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, work on the plan was underway when I joined the centre a little over a year ago. And I remember one of the first senior management meetings that I attended was the one where we went through the SWOT analysis. And many of you will have done this either in your workplace or within other organisations. For those of you that haven't, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And you can see kind of the key ones there on the screen. Some of them are a bit of a mixed blessing. So you get things like secure rail locked site appearing as a strength, and then the lack of road access, the flip side, is a weakness. But it was key to get all of these in, get them on paper and use them to build for the future. The business plan, though, it's a working document. So you'll see that we've already started to tackle some of the weaknesses, particularly on the publicity front and in the visitor experience. And some of the opportunities are also being taken advantage of already. So the Trust have started a major digitisation project, digitising the Great Western magazines, a key part of the collection. And and a lot of work has also gone into planning for new buildings and new development that can take place across the site in the future. And we've even been able to deal with a threat that none of us foresaw a year ago. Yeah, global pandemic didn't even make the list. So the areas that we identified for immediate action and all of those ambitions were distilled into kind of half a dozen themes that will then guide our actions for the next 5 or so years. So for the first aim, improving brand and engagement, we've already started building on the work that had gone on previously. This year, we've mainly focused on our visual identity, on looking at the language that we use in our communications and the use of impactful photographs.
Aim 2 is learning being central to all we do. And the education team already do a brilliant job with formal visits, but there's so much scope to embed informal and lifelong learning into many other activities so that we ensure a fun and educational element in the visitor experience.
And that's key and where the third aim comes in, engaging and inspiring our visitors. So Victorian objects that are used for school visits can be the basis of a handling table that we use at open days and special events. Other initiatives that we're looking at are the increased use of period reenactors. We've made a good start on that this year, but like so much, it's been hampered by COVID. There's also an opportunity for us to become a real true living museum and actually bring the collection to life. better signage and interpretation are other areas that we need to tackle, possibly touchscreens in the museum, making use of that new digitized content, and more importantly, actually engaging our younger visitors in their preferred medium.
Number 4, our buildings, vehicles and other exhibits are full of heritage. For many of us, the main interest is restoring and using them. But as we know, restoring these things is an expensive hobby. So we need to inspire the visitors of today and tomorrow if they're going to keep paying to come back, so we can afford to maintain, run and look after the collection. Number 5, protecting and sharing our environment is much more than green spaces and nature on site. Since the Society took over and started running the site in the 1960s, it's what we've been doing, looking after the buildings and the track and all the smaller structures and inviting visitors to enjoy them. Of course, we need to go further nowadays, but it's an area where everyone can play their part with small initiatives. The large open spaces have certainly proved their worth this year. The nature trail and the kitchen garden already exist, and other environmentally focused initiatives will become more important as we move forward with developments of the site and future building projects. We're able to improve our green credentials and contribute to realising Didcot's potential as a carpenter.
And finally, at number 6, there's Fit for the Future. And I'll explain a little bit more about what we mean by this. So this is really about operating in a financially robust and sustainable way with a wider range of income streams, including partnerships, fundraising, and increased commercial activity. It's about increasing visitor numbers and maximising opportunities on site, but it's also about developing the revenue, a revenue stream for us that doesn't rely on visitors to the centre. So this is areas such as online products. The importance of this has become even more, we've become much more aware of it during this year, of course, with COVID. So it's good that we've been able to sell over 200 calendars and 130 packs of Christmas cards via the website since they went live a couple of months ago. And that really does help us generate income even when we're closed. It also means investing in our volunteers and staff via training, which is so important, and the provision of the correct tools for the job, which could mean software and digital systems, the recently purchased wood chipper, or the new Caledonian sleeper coach. And it also means having the correct management structure in place to ensure that we not only run smoothly, but we have the capacity to grow and develop. So on the screen now, you can see the organisational structure, which is within the business plan. You'll get a printed copy of this, or there'll be printed copies available after we've done the presentation, and there'll be a version that you can look at as well. So if you can't quite read the small print, don't worry, you will be able to have a look at that later. But broadly, in terms of the structure, of course, you've got GWS board, GWT, GWP, we have a museum mentor, and then the DRC or the GWS chief executive. So each department on there has a reporting line via a senior manager who sits on the senior management team. And really, one of the focuses of this is to encourage collaborative working and actually departments supporting one another rather than focusing, specifically on their own areas and delivering projects, but actually unaware of what's being delivered elsewhere. So we want to move away from a siloed way of working and actually improve our collaboration and our collaborative working. The board, the GWS board, is increasingly non-executive, and the focus there is on looking after governance, setting long-term goals, and generating income through fundraising.
It's me, isn't it? Right. So finance, excuse me. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, finance and forecasting. So as Emma just said about the strategic overview that the board provides and looks at. So one of our key roles is that SMT develops their budget submission for each year, or for a number of years, it could be in the future. And obviously we scrutinise that, we ask questions of them, etc. And then once we get the final document that we all agree to, then obviously we sign up to it, and Emma can go off and spend the money and also generate the income. The day-to-day management of the society and DRC lies with SMT, the senior management team. between that and the board, there is a finance and general purposes committee, work group, whatever you want to call it. They scrutinise on a much more detailed level the finances of the operation, some of the plans, etc. for it. It's a sort of filter for the board, so we don't look at all the minutiae. The F&GP would be doing that on our behalf and would recommend to the board certain things, you know, that have come out of SMT. Some of the key financial projections you can see there on the slide. We recognise, and so does SMT, the need to invest. We need to implement to drive the improved performance. Initial results so far over this funny year, this really odd year, have been good. We've had a much better financial year. Apologies, my phone's going to ring. A much better financial year than we could ever have envisaged, and that's down to the volunteers, but also to a massive extent to Emma and Graham and Zep. The amount of planning they put into it to meet all the requirements was phenomenal. We know there's scope to increase membership income, but we're actually taking a cautious view on that. And while we're looking to increase admission income, what we're looking to do really is a steady incremental change and not a massive jump, so that we can manage the growth and manage the systems, put the systems in place that we need to do all that. And that means, yeah, as I said, doing it in a manageable way. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for volunteers. You know, we will always be a massively volunteer-focused organisation. We could not exist without all the volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Everybody actually on the call here is a volunteer in some way or other and contributes to us. And that will be, yeah, that still will be the cornerstone of the society in DRC. And that's my bit. Okay, back to Emma.
Risk management is a lot more than just our operational safety, although it is very important. It's about making the society in Didcot Railway Centre sustainable for the future by identifying and planning to manage all the risks. There are risks across all the areas of the organisation. You can see some of them listed on the screen. And some of these could lead us all to going for an early bath if we're not managed and acted upon realistically. The pandemic was not on the risk register when the plan was drafted, although having access to the site restricted us. Was a lot of the falls into this category of stuff the SMT thinks about, so you can have what you do not have to. And in many cases, the mitigation is about having enough good people and the right resources to keep the risks as low as possible and to give us the ability to respond quickly and effectively should we need to do so.
Thanks, Zep. So much for theory. What about it in practice? And I know a lot of you, it's going to be a case of working out, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for next year? So next year is the 60th anniversary. Huge opportunities, as we've said. So it's about looking in a joined up way across the whole centre and the whole society. Hopefully you've already started to see some of that with some of the joined up interdepartmental working, particularly on some of the maintenance projects that have gone on through both lockdowns. You'll have seen better communication and coordination between the marketing and the operation side. So we tell our visitors what to expect, we sell the tickets, and then we deliver on our promises. For 2021 and beyond, that should become even more apparent. And you probably have seen the piece on the Diamond Jubilee Fund in the latest Echo. 60th anniversary is a good opportunity to look at our achievements, but it's also important that we look forward. It's going to see some key locomotives return into action next year. Zep will give you more detail on those very shortly. But we're also looking at developments across the organisation. We're looking at an extension to catering. so that we actually start to build capacity there, start to invest in gaining more income. So we're looking at kind of a conservatory or canopy that will give us more indoor and undercover space, and that will go on the area that is the current patio. Other projects include the Hayford building, long awaited, and at last, Tim Part and his crew have started it in a low-key way, but hopefully next year that will gain momentum with the laying of the concrete slab. And while it won't be complete in a year, if we can get sufficient momentum, it won't be too long before we actually have a real gem at that end of the site that we can all be proud of, rather than the kind of shanty town that's there at the moment. But key to pushing Hayford to near the top of the agenda has been looking at how it interacts with the rest of the site, particularly the transfer shed, which we've shown with previous Christmas events, with the recent Hallow Steam. It's a great undercover space with huge potential for a variety of activities, but it lacks some key facilities. So things like visitor toilets and a kind of a catering, a kitchen base. So if Hayford can provide those nearby, that end of the site, we end up with some really great facilities that are actually, the whole then becomes greater than the sum of the parts. Also looking next year to continue with Network Rail. Rich is doing a huge amount of work liaising with them on kind of the planning, the logistics, talking to their civil engineers and their contractors regarding the access ramp. It's an absolutely vital area. We need to continue to make progress on this. And this will stand us in good stead for the future, because step-free access is an absolute must-have. But we haven't been able to get grant funding for this using kind of a big bang approach. So let's just keep nibbling away at the project. Let's remove obstacles to the work. Let's build and gain credibility with Network Rail, gain credibility with possible funders. And yeah, we will get that ramp in the not too distant future. Finally, there's the Dreadnought. One of the first coaches on site. It was used at some of the early open days, then used for volunteer accommodation, but it's been out of use for decades, and it's deteriorating. And as Mick Howe said, if we don't do something soon, it'll be too late. So next year is about evaluating exactly what condition it's in. So we need to take it apart, examine it, work out exactly what's required to restore it and what the likely costs are. And only when we've got that information can we then start to make the decisions about the best way to proceed. So we hope you agree it's an exciting range of projects that we're looking at for next year. The progress we hope to achieve is ambitious, and as Rich said earlier, it's important that we're ambitious, that we stretch ourselves, that we continue to drive the centre and the society forward. And all of it builds for the future, and it fits in with the coordinated business plan. Okay, I said Zep had more detail on the locomotive, so let me hand back to him so he can talk about those and some of the events we're going to build around them next year.
Next season, we'll start with a reintroduction and a departure from service. I was home to announce the arrival back in Didcot of Trojan yesterday, but unfortunately that still isn't quite finished. But it will be with us by the beginning of next season. Sadly, February half term will see the demise of the steam rail motor. The boiler would be good to go again, but unfortunately the body needs a lot of work, especially with the panelling, which has proved to be its Achilles heel for several years, and it's not surprising the Great Western moved to better ideas. Easter will hopefully see the return of service of 4079 Pendennis Castle. This will be a great pull for visitors, being one of our most well-known locos, steeped with so much story and history to be told. Then, most importantly, from the Society's history, the return of 1466 into steam is planned for late May, along with the other half of the Schoolboy's Dream Auto Coach 231. The loco will appear in its original preservation livery of Great Western in full on the tanks, and the fun is still running if you would like to give us some money for what you're going to spend in the pub at Christmas. Planning is still going on for August bank holiday, but it should see our main anniversary gala event, where members should be able to get together to celebrate the 60 years with our newly entered into traffic stock. As we have so many new locos ourselves, the number of visiting engines next year may be limited, but we would hope to have at least one for the summer, and we will continue to pursue the possibility of visits for the newly restored Grange and King Edward I. We also hope to pick up on some of the loco hires out that were planned for this year, mainly with the Saint. Our open days this year have proved that we can offer a good day out with just one train in operation. So next year, we will use this on some off-peak days. This does not mean that we will not be wished to run the branch, and some of these occasions, motive power will be selected from the diesel fleet. It will all be about making the best use of the resources and staff we have available.
And that applies equally to events as well. Deb's mentioned some of the kind of more locomotive-based events, but we've shown this year that despite COVID, we can attract kind of traditional and new audiences by slightly tweaking our marketing. And some of the events are very much kind of traditional customary events that we've done for a while, but we've attracted new audiences this year. Some of it involves being a little bit imaginative and using some of the things that we wouldn't normally give a second glance to, or risk not giving a second glance to, using them imaginatively and creating new opportunities. And that can be things like using the 08 and some good stock for shunting demonstrations at August Bank Holiday, which provided interest and activity on the branch line when we couldn't run passenger trains. It could be dressing up the transfer shed for Hallow Steam, again, making use of things that are here anyway. Other things that have worked really well this year was the regular pattern of opening. Once we were able to reopen, we had that regular drumbeat of weekends and Wednesdays for Steam days, and that worked really well. The other thing that I think that we've seen this year that will be around for a while is the switch to pre-booking, and I think that will also be very advantageous for us. So building on that for next year, here's the kind of provisional calendar. The events that we've mentioned are highlighted in purple there. The Steam days are in yellow, and as I said, we've kept that regular pattern of weekends and Wednesdays. Actually, we've extended it from April right through to October. October weekends, just with the Steam Rail Motor this year, worked really well for us. So we think there's some scope to extend the season there. We've added Wednesdays because school visits on Wednesdays in October have also very much unfulfilled potential that we can go after next year. The plan is then to open on Thursdays and Fridays during that period for Discovery Days. So for most of the year, we'll be open to the public 5 days a week. That's absolutely optimal in terms of staffing efficiency. And it also means that we've got Mondays and Tuesdays free for some of those tasks that are just best done when the public aren't around. And I'm sure there's some of you in working groups there already thinking of some of those things that it's just great to get done without the public here. It also means that we've got a couple of days a week that we can do other commercial activities and film jobs if we get any of those. They're quite hard to predict, but when we do pick them up, they are quite lucrative. So there's some space in there for that as well. We've also added Steam days on Thursdays through the school summer holidays. Again, experience this year showed that we were selling out on Wednesdays, albeit to our kind of socially distanced, limited capacity, but it does show that there is the demand there midweek. So again, let's give ourselves the opportunity to take advantage of that and make a little bit more money. We're being really cautious, as you'll see early in the season. I think there's, quite widely recognized that there were going to be some restrictions in place probably until at least Easter. That's the kind of timescale that people are talking about for vaccinations and such like. Hopefully we'll be able to open weekends between the February half term and Easter for some Discovery Days through March. We might even be able to slip in a special event there. It really depends on how the virus goes and what restrictions we have to work with. Also to some extent, just how disruptive the building work around catering is. So all in all, I think you'll agree, it's an exciting year. There's lots of opportunities in there to grow. There's opportunities to celebrate. It's about building for the long term. We think it's founded on 6 decades of achievement, but then fed into that, particularly the experience that we've got of recent years.
Okay, so just before we move on to questions, which if you haven't had a chance to do so already, you can type and send to us via the Q&A function on Zoom, and we've got a couple in there. So do send those in so we can answer those for you. But just before we do that, I'm delighted to let you know that we've been shortlisted for 3 Heritage Railway Association awards. We've been shortlisted for the Award for Internal Communications for the Echo, the Award for External Communications for overhauling the Railway Centre's marketing communications, and the Award for Outstanding Visitor Attraction. So we will wait for the award ceremony and let you know how we get on. But obviously, we're very excited to have been shortlisted for those. Okay, so we'll move on to questions then. So the first question we've had in is from Fred Harmon, and Fred asks, what policies exist for signatures to each agreed or possibly non-budgeted expense proposed, and how are we ensuring appropriate responsibility and, importantly, accountability? So good question. Thank you, Fred. I will start answering that, and then if anyone else wants to chip in, please do so. So in terms of expenditure, the idea is that expenditure is budgeted for, and we're actually going through the budget process at the moment for the upcoming financial year. And in terms of that, that is approved by the senior management team and then by the board around budgeted expenditure. So that's a fairly straightforward process. There's then a procedure where the work package manager signs off the expenditure, and then a senior staff member, their line manager or leadership, does a second signatory there, and then that payment is approved. If it's unbudgeted expenditure, then that expenditure would need to be requested, and then the same process would be gone through. And it's all very dependent because, of course, things change throughout the year. Certainly next year, we've got a new finance manager on board who is also called Emma Kent, but we will certainly be looking at a reforecast at some point later on in the year because, of course, things do change and adjust, and there will always be those examples of expenditure that's required but that wasn't foreseen back in December or January, and so isn't actually in the budget, but it will certainly go through the due process and systems in terms of checking that off. And once again, the senior management team is a really important part of that structure, and if it's much more significant expenditure, the Finance and General Purpose Committee, as Rich explained earlier on, has a kind of key role in terms of scrutinising that expenditure and whether it's justified, whether we need more information, and then actually proposing to board that we approve that expenditure. So it does vary and depend on the budget, on the department, and on the level of expenditure, but there are certainly checks and balances in place in terms of that process for that expenditure. Rich, did you want to add anything else to that?
I just thought it might be worth talking about CDMC. There is another small committee which was initially set up to look at the entrance ramp and entrance building, sort of big capital projects. The remit's been slightly expanded now. It covers all projects that are going to require external funding. So if we're going to finance it internally, that's purely a matter for SMT and for the Finance General Purpose Committee and then to the board. If it's going to require external funding, which means we need a team to work on getting grants or talking to commercial sponsors or whatever, then there is another small committee. And that really is, in the end, will oversee the planning and the implementation of all big, expensive projects. So that would include the Dreadnought, that would include the ramp, that would include Hayford Station, etc., because they are going to gobble money. That's all I want to say.
Great. Thank you, Rich. So hopefully, Fred, that's answered your question there and also given some additional information. Okay, and the next question we have in is from John Sperry, and John asks, or John says he's concerned about how much is planned for the Hayford building. When the transfer shed electrical supply was installed, some provision was made for Hayford and the broad gauge engine house, etc. And the current proposals suggest the load may exceed our assumptions and the partially installed supply cable. So if I can pass that one over to Zep for a response.
At the moment, Tim Part is just taking over the project. He's establishing, obviously, the building regs and things like that. They're doing planning at the moment for putting the slab down. He will then lead the team, and obviously that will include other people into a broader discussion about what the building is going to be used for and what the requirements are. At that point, I'm sure John, Mick and the rest of the electrical team will be asked to join in, and proposals or requirements will be decided upon. I don't think that the discussion has gone that far yet, because there's still discussions about the funding of the building and what its purposes are going to be. And I'm sure they will include you in that discussion.
Great, thank you, Zep. And hopefully that's answered your question, John, and is helpful. The next question we have in is from Eleanor and Nick Hards, and they have asked, who is the museum mentor and what do they do, please? So very good question. And you'll have seen the museum mentor role on the organogram, the organizational chart. So our museum mentor is a gentleman called Tim Bryan. He's actually currently the director of the Brunel Institute at SS Great Britain. But prior to that, he worked at the Motor Museum, and prior to that at Swindon. So and this is very much his area of knowledge. He's written many books about the Great Western. So a very knowledgeable chap, but he has been our museum mentor for some years. Anne Middleton could tell you exactly how many, but I think it's certainly north of 20. And the idea with that, it's actually a scheme run by the Arts Council. And because we're an accredited museum, but a small organization and don't have potentially the necessary museum qualifications or experience in-house, the idea is that we get a mentor to support us with the museum accreditation process. But that role also broadly supports any kind of areas we're working on or we need support in that are specific to the museum and museum accreditation in terms of the Arts Council accreditation. So hopefully that's helpful, but certainly feel free to have a chat with myself or Anne if you have any more questions about the museum mentor role. Okay, the next question is from Robert Heron, who has asked if we can make this presentation available in the members area of the website, please. We are recording it, as you can probably see on your screen, and I don't think that will be a problem. We'll certainly find a way to make sure that the presentation is accessible to those who need it. We also have a PDF of the slides, which will be made available, and we'll have printed copies of that in the journal room and in the staff side of catering on site as well. So, but certainly, Robert, we can have a chat with you and make sure we get the relevant information to the right place online for members and volunteers to access after the presentation. So thank you for that. And then a question for Graham from Ian Cameron. And Ian says, Graham has mentioned disruption due to catering. Can he explain a little more?
Yes, Ian, good question. So it's when we're building the proposed extension out the front of catering across what is currently the patio. So as with any building project, it may be that there are certain times that we can't actually access the existing building or use that fully, and it's then a question of what kind of offer can we have for visitors at that point, and do we have some kind of temporary arrangement? Do we open but make it very clear that we haven't got catering? And again, it kind of means that we may need to just kind of combine some of that consideration with what the restrictions are with COVID, because it could be that in a normal year, yes, it might well be worth us doing something and accepting that numbers will be lower because we haven't got catering, but actually then with COVID as well, kind of tipping the balance. So it's all a little bit kind of flexible and under constant review. But it's really that's what it is if the building work means that we can't safely have visitors in that area, we might just need to make some other arrangements.
Thank you, Graham. And hopefully that's answered your question on that one. A question from Richard, who asks, is the Diamond Jubilee Fund another restricted one? Graham, do you want to start answering that, and then I can chip in if it's helpful?
So technically, yes, it's restricted, but in in kind of it's probably the broadest of all of our restricted funds that we've got, and it's deliberately been set up so that it has got kind of that umbrella appeal with several projects underneath it, and very much kind of the pump priming for the work that we envisage over the next 12 months, but then also, and that's one of the reasons why we're encouraging kind of donations and contributions on a regular basis, because we want to widen the access to the appeal to as many people as possible, make it as easy as possible, but also small regular sums, actually, you know, the cumulative effect of them and the critical mass of that does then provide something from the Diamond Jubilee that gives us a real legacy for the future that we can use to build the centre for the future. And most of the projects that are in there are going to be, to one extent or another, kind of multi-year projects, which the Diamond Jubilee Fund will contribute part of the funding to, and get things moving and actually make a real tangible difference for the future.
Thanks, Graham. I don't think I need to add to that. I think that's really a very comprehensive answer. And apologies to Richard. It was Richard Pope who asked the question, and he actually then asked a slightly more full question, which concluded with that he thought we were trying to reduce the number of restricted funds. So just to build on what Graham has said, which was very comprehensive, yes, that is exactly what we are trying to do. And I think restricted funds certainly have their place, and they always will. And some external funders will fund you on that basis. The fund is, the support they give is restricted to a specific project or an area of work, or outputs or outcomes from the project or program. And there is a restriction on it. But as far as we can, in terms of support from our members, and any support, as if it can be broadly restricted, kind of very loosely restricted, as Graham has talked about, so it is the most use to the society and to our aims and objectives for the longest term possible. That's what we'll aim for, and we will move away from that very specific, tight, focused restrictions. And as I mentioned earlier, our new finance manager, Emma, will be doing some work, obviously with those who are fund managers and those who have worked on restricted funds in the past, and certainly closely with Mike Bodsworth and Richard Croucher, but just to kind of move that forward, so that going forward, you know, additional monies coming in are as loosely restricted as possible, or are unrestricted. But don't worry, there is no threat to restricted funds. We are required by law and by the Charity Commission to ensure that funds that have come in as restricted funds are spent as they were designated or were restricted. So don't worry about that. But hopefully that's fully answered your question, Richard. Question from Robert Heron, who says, thanks for the organisational structure chart. Could this be circulated, placed on the website, and can names be added to the roles? So yes and yes. So the current version in the presentation will be available as part of the presentation. So you will see that in the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation that we've been through today. But certainly, yes, we can produce a version that has staff names, so that members and volunteers can actually see who's in which role and who's responsible. And I would suggest that's the kind of thing we would put in the journal room or in staff catering, so that that's for easy reference for volunteers who are on site. Okay, moving on to the next question, and that's from David Lamar, who asks, to what extent has the financial element of the business plan been stress tested against possible (brackets likely) negative changes in corporate tax and charitable benefits consequent to the pandemic, for instance, scaling back of the gift aid relief? So to start answering that, we didn't share the detailed financial breakdown. As you'll have noticed, we just referenced the kind of key points from the financial forecast within the business plan. Now, you'll appreciate at the best of times in a 5-year business plan, it's quite a difficult thing to have the financial forecast and predictions in there that will last for 5 years or even 2 or 3 years of that plan. And it's very much more about looking at kind of trends and patterns and what our aims are within that projection for our income and our expenditure. So that's what we've tried to do. The business plan itself, although it's published and approved on a specific date, there are many elements of it that are very much make it a living document. The financial forecast is one, as is the risk register, because things will change and adapt, and they have to ensure the document is fit for purpose and is a useful document. So equally with the financial forecast, Obviously, there's lots of work from the monthly management accounts through to the budgeting process, reforecasting, our KPIs, which are key performance indicators, which are tracked by the senior management team on a monthly basis. So that's very much a living part of the business plan. And we are, as I've said, it's difficult in any year. Of course, this year and looking at next year, it's incredibly difficult due to the things you mentioned, but also just the unknowns around audience and visitor appetite for visiting and everything else. But certainly we are aware of those as risks, I suppose, in terms of financial planning. And do look at, you know, maybe right from a kind of more pessimistic financial forecast or a more challenging financial forecast right through to, you know, what can be achieved on a more optimistic level, and balance the forecasting and the budgeting within that. Does anybody else want to add to that? Okay, so hopefully that's been a useful response, David. And thank you for the question. Something from Fred Harmon here saying entrance building decisions. Do you want to say a few words on this, Rich?
Yeah, we've taken another look at the entrance building, mainly, if I'm being honest, to do with costs and financial implications, and also with the projected plan for Hayford. Perhaps some of the roles that the entrance building would have fulfilled could now be fulfilled by Hayford. Yep, we will still construct an entrance building. We still hope it'll be some type of building that has a bit of a wow and sets the scene for the people's, you know, the person's visit to the centre. So yeah, there still will be a nice entrance building up there, but it might not be the one that we originally planned. I know that's answered your question. Okay. The ramp is the main thing. The ramp is the focus at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Rich. And hopefully that has been a good answer to that question. And the other thing to say is just, you know, we will continue to ensure that there are updates around all development activity on site, and obviously that will be part of that. Question from Mick Jarvis, who asks, when will names be put to the organisational chart? So hopefully that was answered as part of a previous question, but just to assure you, we will have names on that, and that will be available for volunteers to access. Another question from Mick Jarvis asking, will catering be reintroduced at weekends for volunteers? Surely this has an effect on volunteers who travel a distance. Zep, do you want to answer this one? Or Graham?
I can take that one. Yeah, so yes, it will, Mick. So from next weekend, when we start the Steam into Christmas, then there will be the usual catering for volunteers. So that's back. And again, it's one of the things that we've discussed for the future. If there are periods of the year when we're not open to the public, but we're going to have a significant number of volunteers on site, and we need to provide catering as part of that package, then it's certainly something that we may look at in the future. It might not be that we can do it for every single day, but for certainly if we've got particular, you know, project days or project weeks or whatever, then it's certainly something that we can look at doing. So I think probably a more flexible approach in catering than we've had in the past is something that you'll see from kind of next year onwards.
Okay, hope that was helpful. And just to say, of course, we do appreciate that many volunteers do travel a fair distance and sometimes a significant distance to get to the railway centre to, you know, contribute and volunteer in all the incredible and wonderful ways that you do. So obviously a big thank you for all of you who do. And just to say we do appreciate that, and that good food once you're here is a huge benefit. And we very much do get that, and we'll work to make sure that's possible as much as we can. So something from Mike Warner here, which is very nice. Thank you, Mike. It's a compliment on the presentation, so thank you. That's much appreciated. And he also says, looking at the rooms you're in, I wonder if Richard would like some models to put in his display cabinets, because we're obviously surrounded by wonderful things. Just to let you know, myself, Graham and Zep are actually in the reading room in the museum annex, and socially distanced, so we are at least 2 meters away from one another, so don't worry about that. And Richard is at home and did have some lovely models in his display case previously, didn't you, Rich?
Yeah, all the good stuff's been packed, ready for a move.
But thank you for that comment, Mike. was much appreciated. I've got a question here from Amius, which Amius asks or says, restricted funds, many members who have given to restricted funds over the years would be deeply offended at any suggestion of changing the status of those funds. So that, apologies if I was unclear, or you may have asked that question before my answer, but either way, just to reassure everybody that we will not be changing restrictions on funds. It's not something we can do or would want to do. So anyone who has donated in support of a specific project or a vehicle or an area of our work and has donated to a restricted fund, that restriction will remain in place and your funds will be spent, or your donation will be spent on that project or that vehicle or that program of activity. So we cannot change that. It's much more about looking forward and the funds we generate going forward. Actually, how are we restricting, either loosely restricting those or talking to members around areas where an unrestricted donation might be very supportive. So please don't worry, restricted funds are restricted funds and they will be spent as you have donated them. So hopefully that will reassure you, Amius, and others.
I'd like to just say a little bit as well. In our treasurer, Charles, he has a massive amount of knowledge of charity law, as he serves on the board of a couple of other charities. And Emma Kay, our new finance manager, also has a background in charity laws. So we know all the problems there are with possible, I say problems with restricted funds. And the only way we could ever change what they were used for is if we approach everybody who donated to that restricted fund to get their permission to use it for something else. So yeah, they are sacrosanct.
Thank you, Rich. No, that's a very good point. That was helpful to clarify and add on. And then the next question is from Fred Harmon. There's another one for you, I think, Rich, which is a question about the use of additional land to the south next to Network Rail.
Yeah, the very latest, and it literally only happened yesterday, is we're very, very close now to signing what they call an underlease for the what is the DB Cargo Forest at the moment. What we've agreed with them is it'll only be used for storage of vehicles and historic items. So in other words, we can put perhaps some of the less presentable vehicles that are on, say on display, but are in the open on the site. They can be moved over there once we've relayed out the track, etc., and cleared the forest. And also we could store, building materials, sleepers, chairs, etc., all that type of thing over there. But it won't be open to the public. It's not going to be a public area. So it literally will be the other side of our fence, and we'll have to have some type of fence around it to set out the boundary between us and Network Rail and DB Cargo.
Thank you, Rich. So yes, the latest update on that, but it's an exciting, an exciting opportunity for us, and I think will be very beneficial going forward. Another question from Fred Harmon, who asks, volunteer training or set up apprenticeships to ensure skill set for the future. So I'll say something and then anyone else who wants to chip in on that. Yes, completely agree. So on the one hand, that ties in with training around volunteers and also staff, and certainly some of our more junior staff who in more junior roles, who are younger, who are actually learning skills that are incredibly beneficial, certainly to the heritage rail industry, but just generally more traditional skills as well. And the good news on that is that it's an area that obviously we want to focus on, is actually allocating some budget for that kind of training to ensure that those skills are preserved and developed. But also it's a very it's an area that funders, heritage funders and others are very keen to support at this point in time as well. So certainly an area for growth for us in terms of funds that we can receive, that we can apply for and receive to support those areas around traditional skills and the development of those and the retention, of course. Anything else on that from anyone?
Yeah, I'd say just to widen it slightly, it's not just about the kind of traditional heritage skills, but again, I think we're quite well placed. Whether it's formal apprenticeships or whether it's just more kind of training and investment in some of our young staff that we have helping us with events, or particularly in catering, where we can actually give them those job skills that will definitely help us and will help them for the future. And again, it's something that we can invest in, and we may get some part funding towards those courses as well, and actually get those staff kind of more invested in the centre.
You're on mute, Emma.
Aha, that would be helpful, wouldn't it, if you could hear me? Sorry. Just saying thank you for the question to Fred, and thank you for Graham's response. And hopefully that's a helpful answer, certainly an area that we want to focus on and ensure we're investing in into the future. A question from Mick Jarvis, which I'll hand over to Richard Preston, who asks, can we put buildings up to cover stock on the additional DB Network Rail land?
We can put up temporary type buildings on that land. I say temporary because the lease we're going to have, it's not like this lease for the engine shed, etc., where it's 50 odd years and then it's a rolling lease. I think DB Cargo's got a lease on that land for 120 odd years left. So there has to be restrictions in it which allow them, if they want, or Network Rail want, they can take the land back. They have to give us notice, etc. But we can, yes, we can put buildings up, but we wouldn't put anything permanent that we couldn't take down. The feelings are, and the risks I think are minimal, that they will never want it back. But as always with these things, yeah, they're not going to put that in any agreement. So yes, yeah, we can put a building up. I think, you know, it would be like well, there are so many different types of buildings you can put up now, but there's corrugated steel buildings that we can easily put up to put stuff under cover if that's what we want to do. Initially, you know, we wouldn't be planning to erect anything.
Thank you, Rich, and hopefully that's been a comprehensive answer to that one, but it's a good question. Obviously new land, new opportunities, and it's useful to understand what we can do and what we're planning to do, and what is more difficult or we won't be planning to do at this point in time. Okay, so we don't have any more questions in, unless anybody wants to very speedily type anything that they've kind of forgotten to ask or kind of feel that they would like to know. Okay, there we go. Yep, Amius, thank you. Okay, so Amius has just said, today has undoubtedly been useful. Thank you, Amius. And can we include reference to these various Zoom meetings to encourage wider involvement for those who do not use computers or who have not really picked up on the efforts being made for those away from Didcot? So that's really in terms of access, making sure that this is accessible to as many people as possible. And it's a very good point. And yes, I do agree. So in terms of what we make available online in the members area and or how we share the copy of this recording, we can certainly have a look at that, so that actually if somebody can't join the Zoom meeting, but they've got somebody who can actually play it to them after the meeting, so they can watch and connect. That's brilliant. And equally, thank you, Amius. Yes, something in the echo to encourage IT. We'll certainly have a look at that. But I think it's a very good point around access and making sure that all of our members and our volunteers feel comfortable and are able to access this kind of information. So we'll look at different ways to share that and make sure it's accessible as possible. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, and does anybody on the panel want to say anything in terms of wrapping up, or anything that we would also like to share? Okay, brilliant. Well, I think that concludes, and we've done the whole session in 58 minutes, which is pretty impressive. And but hopefully we shared all the information we needed to share, and that's been a helpful introduction to the business plan and kind of what's set out for the next 5 years. And also just to say thank you so much to everybody who's joined us, and also for all of your questions, which have been very good questions, very helpful, and have really helped to tease out some additional detail in terms of what's going on and what's in the plan and what those plans are for the future. So I'll hand over to Rich just to wrap up the meeting. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for Graham, for Emma and Zep for setting it all up, and obviously everybody out there, all 38 of you, for participating. I think it's been useful. As I said at the beginning, we will hold more of these type meetings, perhaps some face-to-face and some on Zoom or whatever. It is a fundamental change, I think, actually having a business plan. We've had, you know, not even plans, but, you know, people have done wonderful things with restoring coaches, restoring locos, etc., putting buildings up, but there's never been an overall plan or vision for the centre, for the society. I think this just having a business plan in place and having this discussion is a massive step forward, and it's great. And I'm glad so many people want to participate. So thanks for your time.